toward one of his corps commanders, John Gibbon. John Gibbon says, we have a printing press that travels with our corps, the 24th Corps, and we could use that printing press to print off parole passes for the Confederate troops. Now, those parole passes would be good for getting Confederate soldiers safe passage through Union and Confederate lines, but Grant said those passes could also be used to get Confederate troops free transportation on board government railroads and steamships. And it would also allow them to draw rations from Union commissary officers that they encountered on their way home as well. Sounds like a pretty good plan to General Lee, and so he accepts that. He says that sounds like a good arrangement. And that's pretty much how the meeting concludes, is the generals agree this system of printing parole passes would be the best way of returning these Confederate soldiers home to their families. And so at that point, the meeting comes to an end. Lee rides back to his headquarters, and he'll stay around here till the morning of April 12th. That morning, he'll head back toward Richmond, where his wife and his daughters were living. Grant, almost immediately after the second meeting, heads back north. He heads to Washington. He's got to report to President Lincoln. And he leaves General John Gibbon in charge here. Gibbon is left in charge of paroling the Army of Northern Virginia. And so later that afternoon, General Gibbon sends his printing press over to the Clover Hill Tavern, to General George Sharp, who has made his headquarters over there. George Sharp is basically in command of the military police at that point, here with the Army, and it's going to be his responsibility for paroling these Confederate troops and getting those parole passes printed out. And so General Sharp gets the printing press set up inside the Clover Hill Tavern, and he starts getting those parole passes printed off. He has some printers assigned to that duty. And they will end up printing more than 30,000 parole passes there in just about 30 hours. So that was a very busy spot here on April 10th. Now, also happening that afternoon is a second meeting in the McLean House, the same room where Lee and Grant met the previous day. It's called the Commissioners' Meeting. General Gibbon will meet there with 2 other Union generals and 3 Confederate generals, and they have to hash out all the details here that were left unresolved after this first meeting between Lee and Grant. Things like who exactly is included in this surrender? Who's going to be responsible for collecting the Confederate arms and artillery here? When will that take place? Where will that happen? Who is going to be making a list of the Confederate soldiers that are getting paroled here? All those details are hashed out in what's called the Commissioners' Meeting, and they'll make something called the Commissioners' Agreement later that evening on April 10th. Now, one of the things that the commissioners decide is that the first branch of Lee's army here that will be paroled is the Confederate cavalry. It's the smallest branch. There's about 2,000 of them left with the army.